Welcome to my review of Gym Power for the Super NES. I thought this would be a kind of strange game to cover that doesn't get a lot of coverage, and for good reason. But I'm going to go over all the various pros and cons, things that I kind of liked, and what I disliked about the game. I'm also kind of going to cover a little bit of each level, just to give a general idea of the flow of the game. And since I really like breaking these games down, I will show the final boss as well, so be aware of that. For most of these old games, I don't think most people are too concerned about spoilers, and I like to really give a full review of the game. Especially since, I only review games that I completed. So, this was one that I beat, and I did a tutorial on it, which I'll post a link in the description if you want to check that out. It has full commentary and breaks down the whole process for beating the game. This is one of the hardest games on the Super Nintendo for sure. Now, recently I completed Super Smash TV on the system, and that I found to be even harder. But, honestly, this game, for me, was probably even harder than Super Smash TV because it took me about 6 days of straight, not straight playing, but playing for a few hours each day, at least a few hours. And this one was more stressful for me because it's just such a tedious chore to play, And Super Smash TV was a great game that was a lot of fun, super fucking intense, but very enjoyable, Whereas this game is just a very tedious grind of memorization. So, with that said, you can probably guess where my score is going to be going with this game, but I'll save that for the end. So yeah, in this game, you have a mix of 2D side-scrolling levels, you have 2 overhead view levels, and 2 shooter stages. So, it is a nice mix of genres, conceptually. It's a nice idea. The mini-bosses like this are all very, very simple fights. The boss fights are also extremely easy, especially compared to the difficulty of the rest of the game. They're usually very, very simple bosses that have a very simple pattern, as you can see, which really doesn't fit the rest of the game, but it's just poorly designed because, you don't even have good boss fights or anything like that. So the game did come with 3D glasses, and when I was young, I actually fucked around with my friend Bob Rupples, and we got a bunch of 3D glasses sent to our address by using about 10 or 20 different names and making phone calls and shit and just ordering a bunch of them. I don't even know why we did that. Looking back, I think it was just for comedy to see names with 20-letter last names and shit on the envelope. It was kind of funny, but there wasn't a lot to do back then, so different fucking times, man. But the reason I got into this game was because of an EGM article, an EGM magazine, which back then we didn't have internet, so it was EGM magazine, and they were a really good magazine for reviews at the time. They had less bullshit than some of the other magazines, so I liked them. They seemed more straightforward and more critical, whereas a lot of magazines were basically just sucking up to whatever game just to get paid and giving high reviews to a lot of shit games. EGM seemed pretty legit. And they would usually have 3 opinions on each game, which was cool. So 3 different review scores with 3 different write-ups. So in EGM, they had a top 10 hardest games of all time list, and this was at number 1. So it just kind of piqued my interest, because I was like, this is, I was thinking back then I didn't have a lot of information. I was thinking like this is the pinnacle of, of gaming achievement if I can beat this shit. So I got kind of a little obsessed with it. And of course, it's not a good resource, but back then, what resources did you really have? You picked up games based on the box art a lot of times. So, I ended up getting this game. I found it for $20 or something like that, new. Because, of course, this game wasn't selling well because, for good reason. I'll explain why this game never became popular. But, yeah, so that's what intrigued me about the game, and when I was young, I used to play it quite a bit, but I didn't have access to save and load states and all that to practice efficiently. But I actually got to the final stage. I got right before the final stage. I got to the boss right before the final stage. And I did that without any save state practice or anything, just playing regularly. There was a stage select code you can use to practice too, but I don't know if I really use that too much. I mostly just kept playing. And my friend was playing it too, and he would get far, so that kind of pushed me on to try it to get farther. But it was always like this tedious chore, a game that I never wanted to play. So it kind of brings back bad memories of just tedium, It's not really, it's nostalgic in a bad way. but I did used to play it a lot to try to beat it. This and Lawnmower Man, which is not nearly as hard as this. But Lawnmower Man is actually a decent Super Nintendo game that I'll probably review once I beat it. I got to go back to that one and beat it. But not because it's a great game, just because it's a part of my past, the game that I wanted to beat back then. You know, I was getting into these really hard games, and that was one of them. But yeah, I never beat it back then. And now this second stage, the first stage is about 10 minutes long. I chopped it up. It's a very long endurance type of stage where you just tediously move right, and you just inch your way through the screen and make sure you clear out all the enemies, and you got to inch the screen, and you got to figure out all the little obstacles and things that you have to jump on and platforms and memorize some of those because some of the jumping is tricky. And it's basically just a pure memorization of just really really slow movement, inching your way through the screen. That's what the first level is. That's what most of the game is, aside from the shooter stages. Then this second stage is the most boring stage in the entire game. You have to collect these keys to open doors, and you really have to move carefully because everything kills you in one hit in the entire game, obviously. But you have to really inch your way around these maps, and if you get hit by a turret, you die. You know, anything can pretty much kill you. So you have to be very careful. Then, a little bit later in the stage, they add these spinners into the stages, which easily can fuck up your controls and make you walk into shit and die. Because the control is already awkward using the L and R shoulder buttons to rotate your character. It's like Contra 3, if you've ever played the overhead stage in Contra 3. The difference is Contra 3 is actually a great game, and this is, this is a little bit different than that. So, it does steal that idea, though. And what sucks about this stage is that you have to collect these keys in the stage and use your map to see where the keys are if you don't have the stage memorized. What sucks about that is if you're missing a key and you open the wrong door accidentally, you might as well just commit suicide with all your lives and restart the entire stage because you're fucked. You cannot beat it. You have to open the doors in a certain order. So if you get, if you're missing a key and you pass a certain area, you'll have to restart the entire level. So it's just very tedious. It's not actually difficult, but it'll try your patience because you're going to get sick of playing this stage, again and again every time you're working on the game to try to beat the game. So then after beating that, you finally get to the first shooter stage. These shooter stages are complete shit. For one, you have a massive hitbox on your ship, so everything can hit you very easily. The controls are very loose, and the game just isn't designed for your ship to fit between a lot of the bullets and things. And basically the way it's set up is you just have to have all your positions memorized and be in the right space at the right time. You really can't rely on your reactions at all for stages 3 and 6, the shooter stages. You have to pretty much have them almost perfectly memorized or you just die. Because of that, I had to actually re-practice stages 3 and 6, the two shooter stages. I had to re-practice them several days into my attempts at beating this game because it took me so many days to practice this game, 6 days of working on it before I beat it, that I forgot a lot of the stuff I practiced. So I had to go back and make sure I remembered every little bullshit little movement that I had to do. Very tedious, very trial and error memorization based. And these are the worst example of that gameplay, these two shooter stages. They're very badly done. And my good friend Cool Hand Mike, who's posted a few reviews on the channel, he actually gets motion sick from this game. So some players will probably get motion sick just from the backgrounds moving in a weird way. And if you wear the 3D glasses, you're probably even going to get more ill if this does affect you. For me, I didn't have any issue like that. But I will admit that the visuals are cool. All the parallax scrolling is very cool looking, and it's unique. It has a unique visual style. The music is pretty good. But the gameplay that's here is like a mixed bag of shit, pretty much. You know what I mean? You got different styles, which is a cool idea, but way too many fucking problems. So this footage is actually from me beating the game for my first and only time, and that's the footage that's used in the tutorial that I posted up. One of the first videos, probably the first video I posted on my channel back in 2014. I didn't even have capture tech back then, but my friend actually captured it for me using a computer program. Or I think what it was is the emulator had something built in where it recorded your inputs and you could play them back on the emulator and then record it. I think that's what I did. It was kind of a primitive way to record, but it worked. So yeah, this is extremely specific. Like, if your memory is off just a little bit in these stages, you'll start dying like crazy. So, it's very, very difficult. And it doesn't need to be this difficult. See, another thing with this game that seems odd, and I've never heard anyone mention this before, except me and my friend kind of believe that this is what happened. It seems that when they translated this game from the European version to the US version, when they ported it, the speed was off. So the US version runs at hyper speed. You'll even notice in the character animations in the levels when you're walking as your character, side-scrolling levels, your character, even his idle animations are very spastic and sped up. Same thing with all the enemies. You'll notice that they kind of shrug their shoulders around and bounce around in a weird kind of ultra-fast kind of way. And the platforms move super fast. So I think part of the difficulty in this version is because the speed wasn't done right when they ported it over. That's part of my guess. I have beaten it on... I didn't beat the Amiga version, but I beat it on PC Engine CD, I believe. And that one was actually a pretty easy game. Very easy game, actually. And this one is super, super fucking hard. So I think something went wrong in the porting of the game. I think that's part of the reason. It doesn't help that the game doesn't play well. Now, the side-scrolling levels, to be fair, have, very tight control. But everything moves so spastic and fast that, by the time you land from your jumps, the platform may already be somewhere else. So you basically, when you're jumping on platforms in the game, some of the crazier platforms, you have to actually make a mental reference of where the platform hits in the background before you make your jump so that the platform will meet your feet as you land from your floaty jumps. But the control is actually very tight on the side-scrolling stages. I can't complain about that, and most of the stages are the side-scrolling stages. At least, I would say stages 1, 4, and 7 are the side-scrolling levels, but that is one of the main parts of the game. But, the control on that is good, and actually in the past, I kind of thought that maybe this game, I would review it as being kind of an average game that's just overly difficult. But I'll explain why I've kind of changed my mind on that currently. I kind of feel differently about the game now. I was being more forgiving to it when I reviewed it on GameFAQs some years ago. I think I gave it a 5 out of 10. But I'm gonna be modifying that a little bit. But yeah, this is another very simple boss fight that's all about positioning. Now, you can lose a lot of lives on this, obviously. You'll get run over a lot and shit if you don't know exactly where to be. But when you know how to move for this part, it's very easy. All the boss fights are extremely simple. The main bosses at the end of the stages are more complex than the mini-bosses. The mini-bosses are like a complete fucking joke where you just usually stand in one place and duck and then just keep firing until they die. So now we're on the 4th stage. The 4th stage is another side-scrolling stage where you're going to be moving very fucking slow, inching the screen and constantly firing at all times and just inching your way. That's why one of the reasons why this game is very tedious to beat. It's just a very slow-moving game. And if you get just a little bit too excited and try to rush a little bit, you'll most likely be killed. You die so easily. And I think part of that is because they never fixed the speed when they ported it over. I feel like there's definitely a speed issue with this game when it was ported. Look at the way the gems move up and down. They move super fast up and down. It's not a normal speed that you would see in a game. Everything, it seems very sped up. It's almost like playing a game on fast forward or some shit, But you see this weird platforming that you have to do. It's a lot harder than it looks because it's so spastic that by the time you land your jumps, the platform is gone. Not only that, but the background is spazzing out all the time, which can further make your reflexes kind of fucked up. It kind of disorients you, So, and you're going to see me doing this throughout my whole playthrough in the tutorial where I'm really just inching my way through. Now, for the shooter stages, I just had to have them completely memorized because those are auto-scrollers with a very fat ship with a huge hitbox, very floaty control. And, the way things are spaced, like I said, it's just not designed for a ship that size. The only way to do it is just to have it completely memorized. And it's a lot of shit to memorize. It's really not an enjoyable experience. So, when I review a game, I'm not reviewing it merely on playability. If it's playable, beatable, or, even if it's fair. I won't even rate it just on if the game is fair to play. What I'm ultimately going to review it on, is it an enjoyable game to play? Would I want to play for any other reason than because I wanted it as a kill on my kill list, which is basically all it was for me. I never liked the game. So, The only reason that it had such a strong, I guess the reason it was so strong on my mind was because when I was young, it was when I really, really wanted to beat, because I felt like that would, I was passionate about gaming and I really wanted to push my skill to another level, and I felt like that would be, that if I did that, I would somehow magically just be a great player, which of course that's not how it works. You do get better by taking on those kind of challenges, but you're usually not going to become radically more skilled by beating one game. But a game like this certainly could improve one's skill, or patience, I should say. I don't really feel like this is a game that would really greatly improve your skill, but it would. You would get better at memorization skill with games and patience, because this is a really tedious fucking game. So if you can sit through this and beat it, then you'll probably have that a skill of patience that will carry over into much harder games in the future. But this is not a twitchy kind of game that you're gonna do well by having good twitch reflexes. It's really a memorization game, is what it is. This is a very simple boss too that does the same patterns. Very, very easy. And it really doesn't fit how hard the rest of the game is. But it is understandable why these bosses are so easy if you play something like the PC Engine CD version of the game, where the whole game is just easy. You know what I mean? I don't remember that game being hard at all. So it seems like this was supposed to be kind of a moderate or an easy game, but somehow they fucked it up when they ported it over. Strangely, the Sega Genesis version of this game seems insanely difficult, maybe even harder than this. I don't know if that was officially released. It may have been a beta that I played, but it was insane. It's probably a lot harder than this, strangely. But I don't think it's really an official game because I don't think it was ever released. So it probably needed more polish, if they would have released it. So now this stage controls like shit with this driving. It's very easy to drive into the pits. It's very awkward turning with the L and R shoulder buttons. L to turn left, R to turn right. But this stage is, it's one of the easiest stages in the game because it's a very hard game, and this is a great place to rack up a ton of one-ups. So the main thing here, you want to learn this stage with save and load states just so you can rack up a shit ton of one-ups, because you're going to want those. When I did beat the game, I did a 1-credit run without using any continues, and the reason for that was probably because I got a lot of one-ups in stages like this, mainly this stage. And of course you pick up one-ups. You pick up quite a bit of one-ups, luckily, throughout the game, throughout the stages. So you want to know where those are. But a lot of them are right in your regular path, because this game is not the kind of game where you can go around and explore much at all. It's pretty much straightforward. It does try to copy Turrican. It tries to copy Contra 3. It tries to steal from a lot of games, and does so very unsuccessfully. So yeah, this is more of a continuation of this stage. I chopped all these stages up. They go on for very long. The full game is it's probably a little bit over an hour for the full game, but it's an hour of high intensity because your memorization really has to be on point. It's not intense like Super Smash TV, which I beat recently, which goes on for near an hour and 20 minutes, and it's super fucking intense. But that's an awesome game. This game, Super Smash TV, you're constantly adapting and shifting positions. Much more exciting game. And yeah, it does burn you out mentally because it's so intense, but this is really tedious and frustrating because you're constantly crawling through the stages and hoping not to die. You just have to remember everything pretty much. And it's hard to do that. So this is one of the hardest stages in the game. This is the final shooter stage, the second shooter stage, stage 6. And this is even more fucking trial and error memorization. I mean, the third one is, of course, as I mentioned, but this one's quite a bit harder and longer from what I remember. So, and not in a good fucking way, you know what I mean? But yeah, this shit, it's quite a bit more difficult, and it's a lot denser, and you got the same bullshit mechanic of your ship being way too big, shitty control, huge fucking hitbox. All that shit. So you got that going full stream on this stage because this stage is the worst offender. Stages 6 and 7 are the hardest stages in the game. Stage 7 is the final stage, so understandable. But yeah, this is of course a very shitty stage because of the way the game plays. So this is going to be more of the same bullshit that you already dealt with. Keep in mind, I'm only showing a very small fraction of the stages. I did want to make this a pretty lengthy review and not chop the stages up too much, but the full game would be over an hour. So, if you want to see that, check out the tutorial. And I did commentary on that, and I go into a lot of details. I probably even talk about my thoughts on the game there too. But, I wanted to make a separate video just to review it and just give my full thoughts on the game. I thought this would be a great one to review, not because it's a good fucking game, but it was a very significant game for me in my past. So I thought it would be cool to really go over it. Now, once the final stage comes up, you can see this stage. I show the full, by the way, I'm showing the full stage 3 shooter stage and the full stage 6 shooter stage. So these are unedited. These 2 stages, completely unedited. I wanted to show both shooter stages in their entirety. So you can see this 6th one goes on for quite a while, and it's very, very memorization based. Like those wheels will kill you instantly if you're not placed, in the proper. See that one that comes behind you and killed me? I forgot to memorize that one. So you really, if you have it memorized, you can dodge everything without dying. But good luck with that shit. Like I said, this is one of the hardest games of the Super Nintendo, and I would say of the 16 and 8-bit games. To compare all of them. I would say this is one of the ones that's up there. Now, there are much harder games than this on 16 and 8-bit systems, but those games usually seem to be more difficult because they play like absolute shit. You know what I mean? Like, they play worse than this game. So, that a lot of times the difficulty comes from shit like that, just bad design. But as far as fair games that are mostly fair, this is one of the hardest ones out there on the 8 and 16-bit systems, in my opinion. Because this game mostly does play fair. Like, even the shooter stage, I consider it kind of bullshitty, to say the least. I think it's bullshit. But it is totally, reasonably memorizable. If you get all your positions memorized, you can do it. Even you can get past the control, because the control is usable. But it's just kind of, I don't know, it kind of straddles that line for me of being just bullshit unfair. But I would say it's still fair just because, you can really memorize it reasonably. You just have to take the time to memorize positions. And it's not really, I wouldn't say it's really that hard if you have the patience to sit there and memorize it. The hard part is sitting with this game like I did for 6 days straight to beat it because it was pushing my limit of patience at the time. I did not want to play this game after like the first day, you know what I mean? So it was hard to do that for 6 days. Because I'm very fucking restless. I do complete a lot of extreme challenges, much harder shit than this, but at the same time, when I'm beating a super hard game and it's actually an enjoyable game, at least the game has something to offer me where there's some satisfaction and enjoyability to it, Like, Ninja Gaiden Black, it made me fucking insane when I did the 40 million points on mission mode, which took hundreds of hours. But that was one of my favorite games of all time, so, you felt like you were at least taking... that game has bullshit, too. Don't get me wrong. Horrible camera. But you're a lot willing to deal with stuff like that when you really, really like a game, And I always hated this fucking game. So now this is the final stage. So for this stage, this is where the platform ridiculousness goes to a whole nother level. So now you not only have the very tedious moving the screen inch by inch, as we've been doing... But now you have platforms that are actually really hard to get through without dying. So for these, I had to make mental cues. Like, for example, to do that part, my mental cue was something like when one of the platforms hits the bottom of the ground, as soon as it hits, that's when I do my first jump, and then I jump across. Because if you don't do that, you're going to easily jump in there and hit the spikes immediately. It's like, it's just too fast for you to mentally process, at least for me anyway. The only way I could do some of these patterns was to make mental markers, you know what I mean? To mark positioning in my mind and to only react when I saw certain positions occur. So it's a real weird way to have to play a fucking game. It's not normal to play a game like this. And you can really see how the game feels like it's hyper sped up. It just feels like it's way too fucking fast. It's not like we're dealing with a character that moves super fast or anything, you know what I mean? This is like kind of a sluggish, floaty, jumping character. And everything is moving super fucking fast. So you really have to learn your positioning of where a platform is going to be before you make your jump. Like, that's hard to read. Like, that doesn't, maybe it doesn't look that hard. I don't know. But finding that gap in there is even tricky. And there's much harder parts. But this is just, a simple part can be very hard because of that. And that part's easy. It just looks like it would be hard. But that's not actually a hard one to do. You'll land on a platform most likely. Because when you jump, the platform will most likely land under your feet. But there's a lot of parts that are super fast that are extremely hard to get the timing right. And I even fucked up a lot on one part. I don't think I show the full stage 7 here. I probably should have for the review, just for the fuck of it, but I am showing a lot of the harder parts in this stage. It's a very long stage. I think the first stage and this stage probably are both, at least 10 minutes each. So it's a long time to deal with this kind of shit. And this is the hardest because this has the most, weirdest stuff to time. There's so many areas where you can fuck up with your timing on the platforms. Because remember, it's one-hit deaths. Luckily, you do respawn right where you died as long as you have lives remaining. When you run out of lives, you will go back out to the continue screen and you have limited continues, maybe 3 continues. So, the only difference between easy, normal, and hard difficulty is the amount of lives they give you. That's it, as far as I can tell. So, when I beat this on easy mode, which is not fucking easy at all, but when I beat it on easy mode, it was the equivalent of beating hard mode, I believe, because it was only a difference in the lives, and I never lost a continue. So I think I did the math, and it was equivalent to beating hard mode or something like that. So if you beat easy on 1 credit, it's probably similar to beating hard. It's kind of a cheap way to increase difficulty. They just give you less starting lives on your first continue, that's all. And of course, all your continues are going to have whatever default lives are for that difficulty mode, but that's the only difference I noticed. The mini-bosses are usually very easy, like that one I just beat. Super easy. Later on, you're going to fight 2 caterpillars. This is tough. This can be tricky. I think I fucked this up a lot. I didn't practice this part near enough. So, the thing with this game is you're going to see weaknesses in any parts that you didn't practice enough, and you're going to have shit like that happen. And I almost lost my entire continue right here on my actual legit run. It's so fucking hard to time shit like this. I mean, it's so hard to process mentally. You really have to set these mental markers in your head. Like when the platform reaches this, you jump now, and you have to really, really follow through with it. But the problem was I just didn't practice this enough. See, I did get it eventually, and of course I did that part many times in practice, but I didn't do it enough. I should have used save and load states to practice that part for like 30 minutes or something. I don't think I did it near enough. So when you do finally beat the final stage, now you have the final boss, which it just takes a shitload of hits, but it's a very easy pattern once you get it down. And it's super fucking generic, man. It's this stupid fucking looking enemy. It looks fucking stupid, and it has no animation except the wings. And all it does is move it moves a little bit, then goes back down, then moves across the screen. It does the same shit until you kill it. It's very, very predictable. Now, I did have to practice this for a little while. It's not as easy as it looks, but it's very easy once you know the pattern. You'll be able to do it. Now, if you get nervous, you can easily die and lose lives on it, but if you practiced it enough, you should easily be able to finish off the game. If you can get to that, then it's kind of a huge disappointment if you don't complete the game by that point. But yeah, so overall, my review of the game is going to be a 4 out of 10. In the past, I did review it as a 5 out of 10 on GameFAQs, but I've since changed my mind. I used to think that this is a mediocre game that's just way fucking overly difficult. And I don't usually, I wouldn't review a game badly in any way because of the difficulty. Only if it was unfair difficulty. But I do kind of feel like it is a little bit unfair difficulty with the shooter stages with the huge hitbox. I mean, I feel like that's just kind of cheap bullshit. It's not tight gameplay. I could say that the platforming stages have tight gameplay, but the platforms and everything don't match the speed of your character, really. You know what I mean? But it is tight enough control to where I can't really mark it down for that. But I can mark it down for, one thing, not being a fun fucking game to play. I don't think it's enjoyable at all. I just think it's very tedious, and I would say at times just, kind of unfair with those shooter stages just playing so shitty. So my overall review is just going to be a 4 out of 10. I'd say it's below mediocre, below average, and just a bad game. Thanks for watching.